Okay.
Hey, I'm Arlene Shechet, and here I am. I'm at Pace Gallery. I've been separated from my show Skirts for the last 3 months. It opened and then it closed after about 6 or 7 viewing days. I had a horrible feeling of being separated at birth from this thing that I've worked on so hard and long, maybe about 2 years, and felt so close to, and then starting to see just two-dimensional images of the work. It really struck me more than ever how sculpture cannot be seen very well in a flat form. Of course, you're all looking at this in a flat form, but I thought if I can get close to the work for my heart and soul, and for the ability to learn from this work, then maybe you can feel it and see it differently. So anyway, I'm here with my son Will, and Mark Beasley from the gallery. So it's really, where the building is closed down, we're the only people here. It's both spooky and magical. Anyway, I'm going to talk about the sculptures a bit and the show. And this one is called The Crown Jewel. And when I was making this piece, I felt how I had finally stopped fighting the totem. That I was giving in to the idea of making a vertical piece, because I grew up under minimalism and everything was anti-vertical. So I adopted this and really played with it and had so much fun, confusing the languages of ceramic and paint and wood, and I put it at the front because I saw it as a kind of guardian piece. It has the presence and then the humor of somebody or something you want to have as your guardian. I should say that in this show, I probably use more wood than I have, and I tried to keep, some of it is very much product of carpentry, but I always tried to keep a lot of it wild. And so in this piece, for instance, as you come around, there's a lot of stuff happening with the glaze, and there are always secrets in my work. Something I learned from the 18th century, my studies in the 18th century. But here, for instance, birds had nested inside this burl of wood, and I cast that in concrete and stuck it in and made it out of bronze. So that's a little secret bronze plug. Here, the wood was a little bit compromised, so instead of trying to neatly manicure it, I just hacked out a huge chunk to make it very strong, put in another gorgeous piece of black walnut, and painted it red. So it's not that we're hiding from any repair, but rather the opposite, to highlight that things are interrupted, and to make something beautiful out of interruptions. And right now, in our slightly interrupted or major interrupted lives, maybe that continues to have resonance. So one of the reasons I felt so wrenched and pulled apart, separated from my show, was that putting up a show is one of the only ways I can really learn from my work. And there is one thing to have the individual pieces, or even all of these pieces in my studio. It's another thing to create an orchestration of a show, and installation is hugely important for me. So, for instance, I built this wall, and I don't know if you're going to be able to see it, but it's not, if a wall is a straight wall, it's a partition. But I put this wall on an angle so that it became like a funnel. And it directed the vision from the entrance and introduced the idea that outdoors, the show continues outdoors with that sculpture. And so, permeates the glass, and also just has a gesture, this angular gesture that you will see, I think, repeated in many of the works. Speaking of horizontal, this is the most horizontal of the pieces in the show, and it's called Day In, Day Out. The working title for it was Ham Sandwich. Getting this, even though it seems really impressive to make something big and tall, making something, and all of these things exist as a single piece, but they are engineered together, making this thing come together and be stable in a way where I try to keep it looking as if it's casual, as if it's moving, because I put it together in I really do want that sense of ephemerality, and so I'm looking towards that by creating this sense of impermanence, like it could fall apart, but yet have it be solid as hell. So day in, day out, so this becomes like the rising and setting sun. And then, there is this division of these ceramic works, and then this is a weird version of the sun with the rays. But, this kind of talking about the pieces with an absolute narrative I'm letting you in on this now. This is not necessary to enjoy this work, but there's something about this format that's making me want to share it with you like that. I basically want to make things that are enigmatic and compelling enough from a physical point of view, makes you want to move around, and it gives you like that surprise that I'm talking about. Like every work, every sculpture is hiding something, always. I mean, the nature of sculpture, a three-dimensional form, is that it hides part of itself. So I'm always working with that, and always working with the idea that within that structure, there is a choreography of a movement that the viewer can have, and the viewer owns the piece. You own it when you are viewing it. My narrative is almost irregular. This piece, almost irrelevant. This piece is called Grammar. Rosalind Krauss lent me that word because when she was talking about some basic ideas about sculpture, and I love that basic notion of that basic word that's also very broad. Like skirts is a very basic word that's very broad. And then Thomas Cole, I'm mushing Thomas Cole and Rosalind Krauss is my own little perverse art history joke. But Thomas Cole, whose house and studio are near me in the Hudson Valley. I visited there, and he made this incredibly beautiful hand-painted color wheel. And so I painted the color wheel on the bottom of this, which is a kind of skirt. And then I just pulled it up here so that it bellowed like a bell. So that the structure gave birth to the color.
And Arlene, what were you thinking about with the title specifically, skirt? I think I've heard you discuss it, but...
Yeah. I love things that have that kind of slippage of it's a noun and a verb, and that it is it sort of just popped into my brain, because I realized it has popped into my brain before as an image, starting when I was working at the Meissen porcelain factory with these 18th century figures, and there were so many skirts, and I was thinking, this is so weird that women are represented by skirts. And then being a fan of old movies, there is this slang, oh, those skirts over there. And I was thinking, I want to own that derogatory language and turn it on its head and make it mine in a powerful way, and incorporate women artists, other women artists into that, because I think, we're all struggling. But I love that it's also on the precipice,
Sure.
that it refers to that edge. So you're on some kind of edge, and you can see edges and spaces are just central to all of my imagery. So the multidimensionality of that word is something important. Anyway, this wall makes the room a sculpture. So if the room is a sculpture, then and here's a piece called Fancy. So I'm not going to be able to bore you with a talk about every single piece, but we'll get the drift of the show hopefully, and then I'll come and sleep under every piece. Okay, so here this is another wall because as much as I think the sculptures become like characters in the play, in the theater of a show, their role continues to evolve. They have many roles. They don't always play the same role. So when we're up close, for instance, to deep dive, there's one experience, which is this is a very tough 3-part ceramic, but I made a glaze on it that makes it look soft and spongy. And I took this quite aged piece of walnut, and I cut and welded steel to become part of the wood, and then I took another glaze, a very shiny glaze, to push back against all of the matte surfaces. Anyway, you can sort of just see that, so this character becomes very much a sensual experience. But then here, it's also in the room with these two works, which are called Iron Twins. Works I'm pretty excited about, and which are indoor-outdoor pieces that I made in plaster. The originals were made in plaster. And my intention was to do drawings into the surface, but it just looked too weak. So I ended up using various kinds of tape to do the markings, the drawing into the forms, and the magic of casting is that you can even get the air under the tape. So it's a beautiful thing. But if you stand right here, and Will, maybe you stand right in the center, you see it's a very simple T structure. But as you move around, you can see that it separates and that it's a doubled form. And so thus twins. I made it cast iron so that it has this, I'm in love with lead, and when I was in art school I was allowed to make things out of lead, but now I managed to get the iron to feel absorbent, because a lot of the surfaces are either reflective or absorbent. So this is entirely absorbent, and just, really beautiful. But the way this separates makes it, again, like two figures looking different ways, but speaking to one another.
And this little gap there is very nice.
This gap, yeah, that tiny, we moved, thank you for noticing that. Well, we moved it probably 100 times to try to figure out what the exactly right gap would be, and that this is also an homage to something that I grew up with, which was the Sylvette, the Picasso, somewhat brutalist sculpture at NYU in the courtyard. And I didn't realize that I was doing that. Let me just say I did not go forward with this thinking I was going to be making an ode to Sylvette. But I looked at it for a long time and I said, what is this? Why is this reminding me of something? And suddenly I saw the ponytail and the head and, all of that, that reminded me of Picasso, who is certainly a problematic figure, but a great sculptor.
Great sculpture.
Yeah, a great sculptor. And so then the thing is, looking at, this is the biggest room in terms of numbers of pieces, and maybe gives the biggest sense of them playing with one another, speaking to one another in whatever way they choose to, or however I set it up. This sculpture is called Magic Matters, and this one is called Under the Cherry Tree There Are No Strangers. In many ways, this spot right here with Under the Cherry Tree and Magic Matters sums up a lot of what I'm thinking about for art, in art. That Under the Cherry Tree There Are No Strangers is a 18th century haiku that was sent to me after my Madison Square Park, one of the performances I organized at Madison Square Park, where thousands of people came together to experience Diane Wiest and Beckett doing Happy Days. And it was so moving to have thousands of New Yorkers, and we want to do that again, outside in this big round space that I had created. And a poet sent it to me saying, this is what it feels like you're never alone, if you can all be experiencing something together, because there's a different kind of joy that you get from art, experiencing art together. And I think that right now we're missing that so terribly. I mean, I know I do. But I used it for this piece, that title for this piece, because another part of this piece is its relationship to being a scholar's rock. And this, when I was studying scholars' rocks, these contemplative rocks, and you can look through here as an aperture, you're going to have to move away, right? When I was studying scholars' rocks, the thing I always loved were the stands that the scholars' rocks sat into. And so this wasn't something this just came out of me, and then I realized what it was, and so I followed it. And this, so we might see this as the rock, and we might see this as just the holder, but clearly that's not. The only thing is the first time I've ever used gloss paint and a kind of drawing and painting into and onto the piece. And this, in fact, is a cherry tree. This came from a cherry tree. So that was another layer of what is happening. Will, I bet you're tall enough you could get the fact that this is painted there. Most people can't, or, depending on what happens. And with this really convoluted shape, which were each totally separate sculptures at one point. So when I make sculptures, I'm making them in real time, and I'm just moving things around. That's why I have assistants who break their backs moving things for me, which I so appreciate, because we do it hundreds of times, things all over the studio, thousands of times probably, and that's the only way I know how to do it, because I'm not making a model, I'm not making a drawing, I'm trying to do it. I'm making it in real time, real space, real materials, and then the color is another time. And so I get to revisit how I can take this object and break it up using the color, how I can make these parts be friends with other parts and also be separated from the closest part next to it. All of that is stuff I'm doing and thinking about. I feel like if I did a drawing, and if I did a model, and if I knew too much, I wouldn't be having fun. And basically my premise is, if you're gonna have a life in art and be in their studio for most of your life, and I've been lucky to do that it has to be that it's actually obviously painful, but mostly fun. Mm-hmm. Or a kind of perverse discovery sort of fun.
So Arlene, what happens from that moment in the studio to bringing these works collectively together into the space? We talked about it as a kind of theatre.
Yeah.
And they're all performing and they're finding their place within the play. What's the process for you in terms of, is there certain key works that you bring in and they're kind of key figures within the scene? Or is it, what was the process?
Well, the process is for a couple of years I'm working on a bunch of stuff.
Yeah.
And then about 6 months before the show, I try not to think that I'm working for a show. Because I am doing other things at the same time. And so I'm not saying what's this show going to be. I'm just going to work for a few years, and then I'm going to edit it into a show. So about 6 months before, I start to say, you're good, but you're not going to make it out of the studio right now. And so I'm not going to finish it.
Right, okay.
Because I have been in various states of to get it finished, to be in the show, for instance, to get it into one piece, transportable, etc., that's like the work for, I have to hire an engineer.
Right.
That's like major work.
Yeah.
Because I want them to travel simply and directly, and I want the installation to be very easy. So, so this piece is one piece. Save the Rock, which travels separately and screws right in. So I eliminate and I put it together, and then I bring then I work on a computer, because then I've winnowed it down. I work in SketchUp.
Okay.
And in a 3D model, both. Because I don't want the gallery to have, and I have to figure out the walls.
Right.
So how many pieces are going to really come in? And so I basically bring 2 more pieces that I think I'm going to use. And this, though, and we made some of these platforms, I would say it was 85%, dead on. But I've only started doing that since I started to have more museum shows, because you really need to do that. You can't be loose about it.
No.
And when I had the show at the Frick, they made a map for every single piece. So that was frightening.
Yeah.
Because there was no, making a mount and not using it.
Yeah. I understand.
So that's basically the process, and then setting it up is really like, I think that's going to be there, but we moved it 20 times.
Right.
It has to be exactly the right angle. This has to be exactly the right angle. Now, it has to be exactly the right angle for me, but does it really have to be exactly the right angle? No, it just has to. But everything that you see, I've thought about, like, here, I've thought about it in terms of sightline.
Yeah. And you mentioned, I love this sightline in 3D.
Oh yeah, Will, you can see, like, and I love sightlines, and to accentuate that point, I have spaces in the works, and sometimes and apertures. There are a lot of apertures within the works, and so that you can see one work. It's like a little secret that allows you to frame something. So I'm framing constantly.
Right.
So I want to make a gallery show as good as a museum show.
Yeah.
I don't feel like we just need to think about gallery shows as putting things up and getting them sold. Because I wouldn't be learning enough from that experience, because the chances are I'm never seeing these works together again. So that's the heartbreak of it. That's what I'm saying. I'm so heartbroken because I worked so hard to choose these things, get them in the right place, and then speak to one another. And so it's really beyond the individual works, but the relationships that are important. Like for instance, this piece, which is called Ripple and Ruffle. There's this weird thing that happened. I didn't even know, but there's a rectangle here. This rectangle happens to be, and by chance it lined up, and I never knew it, the same as that rectangle. Yeah, if you get close, it's not as good maybe as far away, so you can see the shape. So that rectangle and this rectangle are the same, and it is very much like a drawing of mine. Like that's how I draw a rectangle. So I did that, but I didn't know I did that, and it was only almost the randomness of putting the show together. But this piece I put in the middle, it's in a way the toughest piece because it's, but also the most gentle piece. It's called Ripple and Ruffle, and I've, a friend called me up, had this piece of, had a giant tree he took down, and I took about a half a ton of wood back to the studio and then pawed through it. There was this piece I took off, but I could see this had an interesting shape. And I took off the bark and found all these amazing drawings on it made by insects. And I put it in an oven. I have a wood oven so that it dries and takes out any bug for a couple of months. And then, I got to work on it, but I tried to leave this wildness. And then I pair the wildness with this steel, the ground. So the New York City ground is steel. It's not soft grass. And then there was a slice in it, so instead of filling it, I made this piece of plywood, which is a little joke on the pith of the wood.
Because it's fake.
Because it's fake wood. It's not real. There's no real... Plywood is not real wood. So I'm taking this real wild thing, and in New York City, this is a version of wood, and then I'm making this almost camouflaged. People close to me didn't want me to use this glaze, but I love this glaze. I love the near camouflage of this. And, the fact that it's tree-ish and also skirtish. And then it has this big hunk of limb, really, of gorgeous brass. And I've been an admirer of the classical statuary. If you walk down the main hall at the Met, those guys are all standing, those white marble guys are all standing there, and they all have, in order to stand up, they all have some kind of aborted tree trunk at their legs. So this is, and I'm always a fan of those, but this is my play on that, and it is also literally the counterbalance. But the reflectiveness, the absolute manufactured level, quality of this next to this, and the fact that it reflects it is again something that I love. And then I lined this plywood with same material, brass.
And where Arlene is painting within the sculpture, looking at this glaze, there's a real kind of awareness of...
Glaze.
Do you think of glaze as
Yes.
painting in that sense? Or?
Yeah, glaze is painting.
Yeah.
Glaze is painting, except you can hose it. You can take, this thing is so permanent, it won't falter with sun. It's there forever. I mean, it's always a joke when people say ceramics is fragile, because our world is measured by the ancient pots we find. Yeah, so this thing is forever, and you can hose it down, and so it is a kind of painting. I mean, I think Roberta Smith once said that glazing was the first painting. She called it out as that. Maybe in reference to glazing plates or something like that. But it is that. I am using with the wood other forms of paint, other kinds of paint, a whole variety of paint, and I love that. There is a difficult thing about glazing, which is if you were to see this before it was fired, you would see one big gray powdered thing. Yeah. So when I'm glazing, I cannot see what I'm doing.
Right.
So painting keeps me sane because I can at least see the color as I'm putting it on. Like here, this piece, Touching Summer, is a good example where these thinly painted colors, which were touching summer when I was making this, seemed like so far away. So here we are. So so I wanted to get closer. It was freezing. I wanted to get closer to the feeling of summer. So I used those colors and I could see it, but this is glaze.
Right.
And this is glaze. And so trying to have that same, and this is glaze. So in glaze, I can do something that looks like a watercolor, but I can also do it so it looks.
Is this called crackle?
No.
No, it's a different.
No. There's no. Most of these glaze is something that I invented. But you know.
And Arlene, you've often described that process with material as a kind of listening, which I love that.
Mm-hmm.
Is that process and that narrative that operates over time? Does it change every time, or is there a form of listening that's pertinent or particular to you?
No, I don't think so.
No.
I think every artist is listening.
Yes.
If they're doing anything.
They're doing it right.
If they're doing it, the way they're doing it is by making a gesture, and maybe making another gesture, and then the thing starts to be alive. The thing starts to live, and it's tuning in to what it wants to be. And as it evolves, it's almost like a channeling experience. But I always think about it as listening, because I think, first of all, I'm interested in music, and I am listening to a lot of music. Will is a musician, and I like it listening because it's an all-sense experience. I don't think I'm making art only with my eyes, and I don't believe if you are experiencing art in real life that you experience it just with your eyes. I think it's your whole being that becomes involved, and so I like to cross senses. And actually that sort of brings me thinking about how sculpture is very much the other.
Yes.
And so there's a lot more of it to listen to, because people almost uniformly think if you say you're an artist that you're a painter. They just assume painting is what art is. At something over there on the wall. And so people are much more intimidated by sculpture, which is interesting. Like, people have said to me, I don't think they're up to sculpture yet. Or they've said to, various galleries, they're not up to sculpture. Like, they have to build up to sculpture. Even though we are three-dimensional, we live in a three-dimensional space, we are used to navigating that, we're still scared of it. And when I taught sculpture, there was that fear that I constantly was puzzled by, but I feel that what it is it's the other. That it's that maybe it comes too close to being a person, to what a person can be, and then it's threatening. And in these times when we're actually examining those issues of us, other, and how we separate that language, I feel like sculpture and art have so much to do with opening one's heart and mind into accepting, into an empathic situation. I feel like it introduces a kind of empathy. Like when we use words, people can push back. When you use something like this or something like that, what are you going to push back at? And I feel like that's a very, very valuable experience, and I've seen people develop that kind of more open heart and open mind by being accepting and interested and spending time with art. So I don't want to feel that it's, it is frivolous. Maybe it's a more frivolous version of taking action, but I do believe in it. I miss art terribly.
I mean, I've heard you use the word empathy often, and I think there is that. There's like there's a certain kind of othering that happens, but within your practice and the idea, listening is a form of empathy as well.
Yes.
So there's an empathy
100%.
to material, there's an empathy with space, and those relations. And there was something about today, and to be with the work and next to the work was to reveal what the work was, how it was operating on us as audience, as you as a maker.
And see what's different.
See what's different. Actually, there's a question. What feels different?
I know.
What feels different about being in this
Yeah. What does?
There's this odd dance that we're doing with the camera and wheel your son and and it's odd. And every now and again, I'm caught
and it's
by
so
this,
empty.
It's so empty. The sound is bouncing around.
I know.
We're in this contemporary
We're wearing
strange
masks.
moment. We're wearing masks, but that's been normalised or hasn't. It's
No,
a kind of odd thing.
it's not.
And we're very aware of our connectedness to this very
Yeah.
clear but also invisible thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so it feels like a really strong time for art and some sense of empathy.
Well, I feel that it's a time where we can examine the other. We can examine how we so quickly make things the other. And make people the other, and how we don't honor the other very well. That the other can quickly become the other, the enemy, and the problem. And so I don't know. I wish that I could make racial justice and world peace by making art, and I fear that that's not what I can do. But I do feel like artists are sincere players, actors in this world where we need sensitive, smart voices to say, rise up, say your truth. Because that's, as artists, what we're trying to do. We are trying to make something that's true to us. And so when you're saying, you're listening to the voices, that's what I'm trying, I can listen to the voice, I can hear, I can listen to the piece, I can go home, and then I can come back the next day and I'm like, no, that's not what I mean. That's not making sense to me. And keep working at it till it does, and so it's a slow process, and maybe just that, sticking with something, being involved in a slow process, not expecting instant results. As a sculptor, I'm just always shocked at how people can make a painting show in 6 months, that's so slow.
And it's also very much, the thing that I really love about the works, there are many things, but one of the things that we haven't maybe touched upon is they're also imbued with your incredible sense of material and a kind of humor as well. There's a beauty to the fact there's a slice through a tree and you've replaced it with this synthesized version of a tree. And so they're constantly moving and twitching as objects because there's this other form, there's a kind of sense of materials and a playfulness that creates a real theatre. When we came back into the space, you'd said, the show's not open, but the work is still full.
Yeah.
It kind of is. It's an animating.
I forgot it.
And I think there's something about that speaks to our sense of self and the moment as well.
Yeah.
It seems really,
Yeah. I'm glad. I was a little worried actually that I would feel in an empty building, in an empty gallery, that it would feel empty. But here's altered space, or altered state, and it doesn't feel empty. It does have a reflection, and it does have a lot of stuff going on, and it does have a crazy window, aperture into the related world, but it doesn't feel empty. Well, I think we're going to go outside.
Let's do it.
A good view of that. Should we go up this way? Whoa, we're in another world here. So, so this is Oomph. The working title was actually Receiver. Speaking of receiving information, receiving the word, receiving everything, and it. Charlie Ray has said if a work keeps you moving, if art keeps you moving, then it moves intellectually as well. It will move you intellectually as well. And I feel like, aside from all of the specifics, that's the most basic thing about sculpture. Because Charlie Ray is an incredible geek when it comes to formal information, and so sculpture's job.
Sure.
Okay.
That's Chris. Should we finish?
We'll try to show it to you one more time from inside.
Yeah, that's good. We can. It shows nicely from inside. That was the idea. Yeah. So
this is the public work, or a
it's
work
bronze.
product?
It's bronze.
Yeah.
It's at a size that it could be inside or outside.
Right. Yeah. Sure.
I mean, I would love to see it inside in somebody's home. Somebody's it would be incredible. But it also will work outside. I do have strong feelings about public art.
Yeah.
And that what I want.
Maybe talk a little bit the Madison Square Park.
Oh, Madison Square Park. Yeah. Well, I feel that public sculpture can sometimes just seek to create awe and and then fall into being about a single thing. Being a one-liner, having a succinct message. And sometimes that works. All those statues taken down are some of examples of some of that, how they make them high and high and higher in order to be above the viewer. And I have taken the opposite view, that I feel obviously strongly about the transformational ability that art has on us as humans, and that it's a meaning machine. It's a beautiful, I don't know, it's so necessary in my life and with my family and the people I know. It's hard for me to speak about it without thinking that it's absolutely essential. But so I do think it's essential in our culture, and that doing the project at Madison Square Park, where 60,000 people a day came to this park, most of whom almost none of them came looking for the art. And instead of putting it in that grass place, I put it just in the way, just in the pathways, in the way. So people sort of had to bump into it, because I feel like let people touch the damn stuff. If it's outside, it should be touchable, it should be approachable, and it can be bigger than our bodies, but it doesn't have to be towering in order for it to get the idea across. And so I tried to have it be a kind of tender reflection.
Kind of non-monumental.
Non-monumental, yeah. And, that's often a harder sell, but I still believe in it. Because everybody just wants to have the art over there, far away, and work. But I think we can be pretty far from this and have it work, but it's not going to have the sense of being intimidating. And I tried I made the original for this just out of plaster, and so my hand is very much in it, and it's exciting for me to think about doing works that can be both inside and outside, and I'm certainly looking for that while maintaining a kind of intimate conversation.
Maybe that leads us to the now. I think we have 5 minutes. We get kicked out of this platform in about 5 minutes. It's been great. It's been so good to come back to the space. It's my first time back in Manhattan in 3 months, I'm sure.
Yeah.
And for you as well. Much less daunting than I thought. And this is a great way back in. But maybe a last question, very briefly, was in this moment of pause, as we're all isolated, maybe as we're kind of reappearing very slowly back into our understood worlds, what is it to be an artist now? What is it that's really keeping you in the moment, keeping you thinking? Is it a moment of creativity for you? What does now mean, and what's perhaps next?
Well, now is not now.
Right.
So I've gone through, in this time, over the last 3 months, I've gone through many nows.
I hear that. Yeah.
So I would say, for all of the reasons I discussed, being separated at birth from my show, and having just gone through this huge push, and I was so hungry to have people see the work and share it, and finally be back in the city, because I've basically been out of the city, making this work upstate. So the first month I was catatonic, pretty much. But within a week of being upstate, people, various organizations and museums are calling up and saying, "Tell us what you're doing now."
Right.
I feel the privilege of being an artist is to accept being lost. Like, fucking be lost. I'm lost. I don't know. I'm not gonna jump into trying to make that thing that I was making before, because I'm not that person right this second.
Right.
So I felt like a month to 6 weeks, I just was gardening and cleaning.
Yeah. Oh, I've done a lot of cleaning.
Cleaning, so much cleaning.
Yeah. It's a thing.
Trying to figure out how to cook and shop and stay safe, and worrying constantly about my family, and so that was the first 6 weeks. And then I started to, the people who know me started to, my 2 assistants started to be very worried that I wasn't working.
Right.
Like, they're like, "We've never, ever, ever seen you not work." And my family, same. They were just totally freaked out. Like, uh-oh, this was
Let's-
it.
let's just
She's
make
gonna
them
go
up.
under.
That's
Yeah,
definitely.
she's gonna go under. This is gonna be the end.
Yeah.
I mean, they literally, and I felt, I heard that, I saw that, and I wasn't gonna be okay with that.
Yeah.
I mean, I was.
Yeah.
I just was like, okay, I did it.
Yeah.
Maybe that was it. But I'm back at it.
Good.
You know,
Good.
I'm at it. I'm
Yeah.
in it. And it, first of all, I think I'm very lucky to be in the Hudson Valley, and my studio was already there, so I didn't
Right.
have to invent
Yeah.
that. And I have, you know, it is still my lifeline.
Yeah.
It's my lifeline. I can't, you know, and it's, I need it more than ever. And it definitely keeps me feeling alive, and hopeful. In the same way, I think actually all of the demonstration, all of that stuff has, even though I haven't been coming to the city for that, there have been lots of stuff upstate, there's lots of ways to be involved, has made me feel stronger in the studio. It has made me feel more positive. You know, it's been, for the last years and now, it's been such a difficult time. And so, glimmers of hope, and seeing all those young people
Yeah.
out
Yeah.
doing it, yes,
Yes.
it makes me happy. So
Well,
it's good.
That's great to hear.
Yeah.
Glimmers of hope. I love it.
Yeah.
I love it. That's-
Yeah.
Thank you, Arlene.
Okay.
Thank
I
you,
won't-
Will, so much.
Yay.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Will.
Um,
Oh, come on, let's go, Will.
What? Oh, okay.
Come on.
There you go. Thank you, everybody. Thank you so much, Arlene. Thank you,
Okay.
Will. Till next time. Thank
Yeah.
you.
Okay.